AITA for walking out of my boyfriend's family dinner after they served me food I'm allergic to. It's been a whirlwind dating Alex over the past year. I honestly thought we were a perfect match. He's kind, charming, and has this ability to make me laugh like no one else. But there's this one thing that's always been a little tricky: his family. Don't get me wrong, they're not outright awful or anything, but they're a bit traditional, maybe even a little intense. I've been trying to navigate it all because I really love Alex, but this past weekend left me wondering if I'm truly welcome in their world. First, some background: I have a severe shellfish allergy. It's not just, oh, I'll get a rash, kind of severe. It's one accidental bite and I'm being rushed to the ER, severe. I've had it my whole life, and I've always been hypervigilant about it. Alex knew this from the very beginning. It's one of the first things I told him when we started dating because I didn't want any awkward surprises if we ever went out to eat. Over time, I've also made it abundantly clear to his family. They love seafood, like, really love it. Every time I've visited, there's usually some kind of shrimp, lobster, or crab dish on the table. It's fine, I never expected anyone to completely change their eating habits for me. But I did expect a little consideration, you know. Anyway, last weekend, Alex's mom, Carol, invited me over for one of their big family dinners. It wasn't the first time I'd attended, but this one felt different. Alex made a point to say it was a really important dinner, and that his extended family would be there too. He said it was a great opportunity to bond with everyone. I'll admit, I was a little nervous, but I was also excited. I figured it would be a chance to show them that I cared about Alex and wanted to be part of his life, family and all. I spent way too long deciding what to wear, something casual but nice enough to make a good impression. Alex picked me up, and we drove over together. When we walked in, the house was bustling with activity. The smells wafting from the kitchen were, unsurprisingly, seafood heavy. I could already pick out the scent of shrimp and crab, which made me a little uneasy, but I tried to stay optimistic. Surely, they'd have at least one dish I could eat, right? We sat down at the dinner table, and as the dishes were brought out, it didn't take long for the reality of the situation to sink in. Every single plate, every single one, contained shellfish, save for a small, lonely salad that looked more like a garnish than an actual dish. The shrimp cocktail appetizers sat proudly in the center of the table, their vibrant pink color gleaming under the dining room lights. To their right, there were crab-stuffed mushrooms, boozing with cheese, and just beyond that, a steaming pot of lobster bisque filled the air with its unmistakable aroma. A massive platter of seafood pasta, adorned with clams, mussels, and shrimp, was set down with a flourish as if it were the piece de resistance. My stomach churned, not from hunger, but from the growing realization that there was nothing here for me. I glanced around the table, trying to steady my nerves. Everyone was chatting and laughing, their plates already being passed around. I took a deep breath and quietly leaned toward Carol, Alex's mom, asking as politely as I could, "Excuse me, is there anything here that I can eat?" My tone was measured, calm, almost hopeful. I didn't want to make a scene, and I certainly didn't want to come across as ungrateful. I just needed to know if they'd made any accommodations for me. Surely, they must have, right? I had been so clear about my allergy. Alex had been clear about it too. This wasn't new information. Her response, though, hit me like a punch to the gut. Without even looking up from her plate, she shrugged casually, as if I'd just asked her the most trivial question imaginable. "Oh, we didn't think it was that serious," she said. "Just pick it out. Just pick it out." My mind reeled. Pick it out. As if I could sift through the pasta or scoop the crab out of the mushrooms and somehow avoid the microscopic particles of shellfish that could send me straight to the hospital. My throat tightened, and I could feel my face growing hot. I was stunned, absolutely floored by her dismissiveness. I sat there, frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. I mean, what could I even say to that? I've explained my allergy countless times before. Alex has explained it, too. This wasn't some casual preference or picky eating habit. This was a severe, life-threatening allergy. I'd thought they understood that. Gathering myself, I tried again, this time a little more firmly but still as composed as I could manage. I can't just pick it out, I said, keeping my voice steady. Even a small amount of cross-contamination could trigger a serious reaction. It's not something I can take lightly. Carol rolled her eyes then. Rolled her eyes. As though I were being ridiculous, as though I were a child throwing a tantrum. She sighed heavily, her voice dripping with exasperation, and said, "You're being dramatic. It's not that big of a deal." I felt the weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Dramatic? Not that big of a deal. Did she really think I was making this up? That I was exaggerating just to be difficult? I glanced around the table, hoping someone might step in, might offer even the smallest bit of support. My gaze landed on Alex. Surely, he'd say something. He knew better than anyone how serious this was. I searched his face, willing him to back me up, to defend me, to say something. But he just sat there, his eyes fixed on the table. He wouldn't even look at me. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he muttered, "Let it go. It's not worth making a scene." I couldn't believe it. My own boyfriend, the person who's supposed to have my back, was siding with his mom, or, at the very least, wasn't standing up for me. I felt humiliated. There I was, sitting at a table full of people who clearly didn't care whether I could eat or not, being told I was too sensitive for not wanting to risk my life. I could feel tears welling up, but I didn't want to cry in front of them. I quietly excused myself, grabbed my coat, and left. When I got home, I tried to calm myself down, but my phone buzzed. It was Alex. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was checking to see if I was okay. Instead, his text read, "That was really rude of you to walk out like that. My mom was just trying to test your limits. You embarrassed me in front of my whole family." I stared at my phone in disbelief. Test my limits? What does that even mean? Is my life-threatening allergy some kind of game to them? Was this some method to see if I was strong enough to be part of their family? And how could Alex think I was the one in the wrong? I didn't even respond. I couldn't. I was too upset. I feel conflicted. Should I have stayed to avoid drama, or was I right to leave? AITA. Update 1. After everything that happened at the dinner, I spent a lot of time stewing over how I had been treated. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Alex's family didn't just disregard my allergy, they flat out disrespected me. And Alex? He hadn't lifted a finger to defend me. The words his mom had used, testing my limits, echoed in my head like a bad song I couldn't shake. It wasn't just thoughtless behavior, it was deliberate. It was a game to her, a twisted way of asserting her dominance or seeing how far she could push me. For days, I replayed the scene in my head, thinking of all the things I should have said and wondering why I let myself be humiliated like that. But then something clicked. If they wanted to play games, fine, I could play too. If testing boundaries was their thing, then I'd test a few of my own. I wasn't going to sit back and take this anymore. I'd spent too long trying to be polite, trying to fit into their little family dynamic. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one. But this time, it would be on my terms. I started with a plan. I needed something precise, calculated, a way to turn the tables without making it obvious. I didn't want outright confrontation or to come across as petty, I wanted something subtle but impactful, something they wouldn't even see coming until it was too late. The thought filled me with a sort of wicked determination. After days of mulling over every possible approach, I settled on an idea that was bold, risky even, but absolutely perfect. I decided to invite Carol and the rest of Alex's family over for dinner. It wasn't just a meal, it was the first move in my carefully crafted game. It was my chance to regain control of a situation they'd so callously disregarded, and I planned to do it with a touch of irony that they wouldn't soon forget. When I picked up the phone to call Carol, I'll admit my hands were a little shaky, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of what I was about to do. As the phone rang, I mentally prepared myself for the smugness I knew was coming. And sure enough, the moment she picked up, I could practically feel her self-satisfaction radiating through the receiver. She answered with that unmistakable tone she always used, the kind that dripped with condescension and just a hint of passive aggression. It was as if she'd been waiting for this call, as if she'd known all along I'd eventually come crawling back to make amends. When I extended the invitation, her reaction didn't disappoint. She barely let me finish my sentence before cutting in with her own narrative. "Oh," she said, her voice practically oozing with superiority, "so this is your way of apologizing for walking out on our dinner?" For a split second, I was stunned. Apologize? The word reverberated in my mind like an insult. I could hardly believe her audacity. She truly thought I owed her an apology, for walking away from a table where my health and safety had been deliberately ignored. The nerve of it was almost laughable. Almost. But I didn't let my indignation show. I forced myself to take a deep breath, to push down the fiery retort that bubbled up in my throat, and instead, I responded sweetly, "Yes, this is me making things right." It wasn't an outright lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Carol didn't need to know that making things right had a completely different meaning in my mind. The sincerity in my voice seemed to please her. She let out a small, satisfied hum, as if she'd just been proven right about something. Then she launched into one of her little speeches, the kind that made it painfully obvious she thought she was in a position of authority over me. She went on about how I would need to try very hard to make up for my behavior and listed off all the ways I'd supposedly fallen short as a guest at her dinner. It was like she'd been rehearsing this moment, preparing a mental checklist of grievances to rattle off whenever I came groveling. I let her talk, biting my tongue and nodding along as though I were taking her words to heart. It was almost impressive how seriously she took herself, how completely she believed in her moral high ground. The more she talked, the more ridiculous her demands became. She mentioned how important it was for me to show respect to the family, how I needed to demonstrate that I valued their traditions and understood my place in their dynamic. That one almost made me laugh out loud. My place. What was this, the 1800s? But I kept my cool, masking my irritation with an air of docile agreement. I assured her, in my sweetest tone, that I'd put in my very best effort to make the evening wonderful. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice as we wrapped up the call, as though she truly believed I was bowing to her demands, desperate to earn back her approval. When we hung up, I sat back in my chair and smiled to myself. Carol thought she'd won. She thought she'd put me in my place, that I was groveling for her forgiveness. She had no idea what I was planning. This wasn't about apologizing, this was about making a point, and I was going to make it loud and clear. The next few days were a blur of preparation. I wanted every detail of this dinner to be perfect, not because I cared about impressing them, but because I wanted to set the stage for what was to come. I pored over recipes, shopped for ingredients, and spent hours tidying up my apartment. Every dish, every decoration, every little touch was calculated. I wanted them to feel like they were being treated to a lavish, thoughtful meal, something that would put their seafood-filled spread to shame. But there was one crucial twist to my plan, the part of the resistance, the menu. It wasn't just any menu, it was a carefully curated symphony of subtle defiance, hidden beneath a polished veneer of culinary sophistication. Every single dish I served would be something that Carol, or someone else at the table, disliked, not because of allergies or dietary restrictions, I wasn't that cruel, but purely because of their personal preferences. This wasn't about endangering anyone, it was about serving a healthy dose of their own medicine. Over the months of attending their family gatherings, I had paid attention, closer attention than they'd probably realized, to all the little comments, offhand remarks, and scrunched-up noses. I remembered everything, every time someone had complained about a particular flavor or ingredient, every passing comment about hating this or never eating that. Carol, of course, despised spicy food. She'd made that abundantly clear at one dinner when someone had brought a mildly seasoned dish, and she'd spent the entire evening dabbing at her mouth with a napkin, muttering about how anyone could enjoy something that burns. Alex's dad couldn't stand mushrooms, calling them slimy and earthy, and his disdain was so strong he'd once refused to eat an otherwise perfectly normal stew because it had a few diced pieces of mushroom in it. Alex's sister, meanwhile, had a particular hatred for olives. She'd gone on a rant once about how they ruined everything they touched, and I'd watched her visibly grimace when someone brought an olive-studded bread to a gathering. These preferences weren't just passing dislikes, they were deep-seated aversions, the kind people make a point of avoiding at all costs. I remembered it all, filed it away, and now it was time to use it. The menu I crafted was nothing short of a masterpiece in passive aggressiveness, wrapped in a glossy facade of culinary ambition. For the appetizers, I chose stuffed mushrooms, beautifully golden and filled with a creamy, spicy chipotle aioli. The mushrooms were plump, earthy, and unapologetically present, paired with a kick of heat that would make Carol's taste buds squirm. For the main course, I selected a rich puttanesca pasta, unapologetically loaded with olives, capers, and anchovies. The sauce was bold and unapologetic, the olives prominent enough that no one could avoid them. On the side, I prepared a medley of roasted vegetables, generously seasoned with cayenne and paprika, ensuring every bite carried a satisfying heat. And then came dessert, a tiramisu soaked in an extra-strong coffee liquor, with layers so rich and intense that one bite would be more than enough for anyone who wasn't a fan of strong coffee flavors. Carol had once mentioned in passing how she couldn't stand coffee-flavored desserts because they were too bitter. Perfect. What made this even more satisfying was the fact that nothing I was serving was technically offensive or outright inappropriate. Every dish was meticulously crafted, beautifully presented, and absolutely edible, just not to their tastes. It wasn't like I was sabotaging the food or putting inedible ingredients in it. On paper, everything sounded like a gourmet dream. But for them, it would be a nightmare on a plate. And to ensure the full effect, I made a conscious decision to offer no alternative dishes. No backup plan. If they wanted to eat, they'd have to eat what I served, or go hungry. Simple as that. The day of the dinner arrived, and I threw myself into the preparations with a level of energy I hadn't felt in ages. I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. The table was set with fresh flowers in delicate vases, tall, elegant candles, and my best dinnerware. I arranged the plates and glasses with meticulous care, making sure everything looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. I wanted the presentation to be flawless, so flawless that they wouldn't suspect a thing until it was far too late. When they arrived, I greeted them with the warmest smile I could muster, my tone syrupy sweet, dripping with charm. Carol, as expected, walked in like she owned the place, her eyes scanning the room as though she were inspecting it. She immediately commented on how nice everything looked, her tone almost begrudging, as if admitting I'd done a good job paying her. Still, she seemed genuinely pleased, or at least convinced that I was bending over backward to make amends. I could see it in the way her shoulders relaxed, in the slight smirk on her face. She thought she'd won. She thought I'd finally folded, that I'd given in to her narrative of needing to apologize and prove myself. It took everything in me not to laugh. Alex, meanwhile, seemed a little more hesitant. He'd been trying to play the role of peacemaker ever since the disastrous dinner, urging me to smooth things over with his family. But I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes as he looked around the room. Maybe it was the way I was just a little too cheerful, or maybe it was the slight edge in my voice that only he could detect. Whatever it was, I could tell he felt something was off. Still, he didn't say anything. He just followed his mom's lead, taking a seat at the beautifully set table and giving me a tight, uncertain smile. As I began bringing out the dishes, I watched their reactions closely. Carol's smile faltered ever so slightly when she caught a whiff of the stuffed mushrooms, but she quickly masked it, clearly determined not to give me the satisfaction of a visible reaction. Alex's dad stared at the mushrooms for a moment, his jaw tightening, before taking a small, reluctant bite. Alex's sister hesitated when she saw the olives in the pasta, her face twisting in a way that made it clear she was trying to figure out how to avoid eating them without making a scene. It was subtle, so subtle that an outsider might not have noticed, but I saw it all. I saw the discomfort, the forced politeness, the tiny cracks in their carefully curated facades. And it was everything I had hoped for. By the time dessert was served, I could tell they were ready to leave. Carol, still trying to maintain her composure, complimented me on the effort I'd put in, though her tone was strained. Alex looked like he wanted to say something but thought better of it. As they filed out the door, I thanked them profusely for coming and waved them off with a smile. As I closed the door behind them, I couldn't help but laugh to myself. They thought they'd won, that I'd rolled over and accepted their treatment. But the truth was, I'd just shown them exactly what it felt like to have their preferences and comfort disregarded. They'd wanted to test my limits, well, I'd tested theirs. And I had a feeling they wouldn't be so quick to dismiss me next time. Update 2. The next day, I got a message from Carol. I wasn't surprised, part of me had expected some kind of follow-up, though I hadn't anticipated how brazen it would be. The tone of her message was dripping with self-righteousness and condescension, as though she was still determined to position herself as the victim in this ongoing saga. She started by accusing me of cooking an entire meal of dishes they didn't like. According to her, none of them had been able to eat much because everything was so unpleasant. She went on to say that my poor choices as a hostess showed a clear lack of understanding about their family's tastes and preferences. And then came the kicker, she said she would have to step in and teach me how to cook the kinds of dishes they liked. I had to read the message twice to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Teach me how to cook dishes they liked. After everything? The audacity was almost too much to process. At first, I was stunned. How could someone so blatantly disrespectful have the gall to lecture me about hospitality? But then, the absurdity of it all hit me, and I started laughing. It wasn't just audacious, it was delusional. She genuinely believed she had the moral high ground, that I should be grateful for her unsolicited guidance after they had intentionally excluded me from their meal and dismissed my allergy as not serious. I couldn't let it slide. I responded with honesty, plain and simple. I told her that, yes, I had intentionally prepared dishes they didn't like. I explained that it was meant to give them a small taste, pun very much intended, of what it felt like to sit at a table where every single dish was unappealing, where the host had gone out of their way to disregard personal preferences. I laid it out clearly, my dinner was a deliberate mirror of their behavior, designed to make a point. Carol's response came quickly, and it was as predictably dismissive as I expected. She accused me of being petty and immature, calling the dinner a poorly executed stunt and insisting that it was just another test of your boundaries. That phrase again, testing boundaries. It seemed to be her favorite excuse for all her bad behavior, her go-to justification for crossing the line and then acting outraged when anyone called her out. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I replied calmly, explaining that if this was about testing boundaries, then I had simply turned the tables. If they had been testing my limits with their dinner, then my dinner was a test of theirs, and, frankly, the results spoke for themselves. I pointed out that their discomfort and dissatisfaction mirrored exactly how I'd felt when I was served a table full of shellfish and told to just pick it out. If they hadn't liked my cooking, perhaps they could reflect on how their actions had made me feel in a far more dangerous and hostile situation. Her response was slower this time, and when it came, it was shorter too. She dismissed my explanation outright, insisting that my behavior was childish and that I clearly wasn't ready to be part of their family. She ended her message with a curt warning that I had a lot of growing up to do if I ever hoped to fit in. The sheer hypocrisy of it was staggering, and though her words were meant to sting, I found myself laughing again. Carol might have thought she'd gotten the last word, but as far as I was concerned, the conversation was over. I had done exactly what I set out to do. I'd made my point, loud and clear, and whether Carol wanted to admit it or not, she and her family had been forced to confront their own behavior, even if only for a moment. Their discomfort at my dinner spoke volumes, and while they might never acknowledge the lesson, I knew I'd delivered it. For the first time in my relationship with Alex and his family, I felt like I'd reclaimed my voice. They had tested my boundaries, but this time, I hadn't just stood my ground, I'd pushed back. And it felt good.